1. When I was 15, I got my first job in my tiny rural town, in an artisanal tea shop. Once the summer months rolled around, my job became working an iced tea stand outside. It wasn't a bad gig, but it did inspire a lot of irritating and slightly creepy individuals to talk to me for long periods of time. One day, this scruffy guy who seemed a bit off wanders over to my tea stand and starts chatting with me. I keep trying to steer the conversation towards him buying an iced tea, but he was only concerned with talking to and about me. We'll call him Tom. He starts asking me how old I am, where I go to school, my name, etc. As I was still young and naive, I told him, trying to be friendly. Tom then proceeds to tell me his entire life story. He told me how he was in his early 30s and his girlfriend died, and he overdosed on heroin on a bathroom floor. No exaggeration. He stood there for hours going into detail until my boss had to come out and tell my friend to leave. I was definitely put off, but thought it was more sad than anything else. The next day at work, Tom comes back to my job. The moment I saw him, my stomach started turning. Great, another day being annoyed. Tom immediately pulls out a 10-page, handwritten love letter he wrote for me. I began reading it, but it was mostly just literary porn. He then continues to tell me he's never met anyone like me, and how I wasn't tainted by the world yet. This guy flat out told me I was his angel sent from heaven. Great. The next few days, Tom comes back every day I work with a letter. Eventually, I just begin throwing them out, or refusing to take them, and my boss has to tell him he wasn't welcome there anymore. If this was where it ended, I probably would have forgotten about it by now. When he lost his chance to contact me while I was working, he started messaging me on Facebook. I recently looked back at some of the messages he sent me. One in particular was a fiction story he wrote about me, the conclusion of which was basically that he decided I was too beautiful to exist, and that my existence was torturing him. So he pushed me off a cliff. I would block his account, and he would make new ones and message me poems, stories, letters from there. After a while, he must have gotten sick of me telling him to F off, and stopped messaging me. Fast forward about a year and a half. I'm 17 and working at a dingy restaurant in the same town. It was a very laid-back job, and I got along well with all my coworkers. One day, to my dismay, I see Tom walk through the door. I kid you not, I saw this guy's whole face light up with glee when he saw me. I'm surprised he didn't see the horror written all over mine. Again, he comes straight to me and doesn't buy anything, just starts immediately saying how I still look like an angel. I think he found me working here by accident, but once he figured it out, he was not giving up. He started coming back every single day again, and messaging me on Facebook all over again. I couldn't believe he was still doing this. One co-worker I was close with, we'll call him Max, started picking up my vibe when this guy came in. He ended up telling me that he went to high school with him, and he got in trouble for stalking more than one girl, in addition for having a lot of drug issues. Basically, he was bad news. The next time Tom came in, there happened to be nobody else in the restaurant, and Max told him to not so subtly walk out and not come back. He didn't. To this day, Tom still occasionally messages me on Facebook from a blank account to tell me how much I'm torturing him. I'm not sure if he ever had real malicious intentions for me, but for the sake of my sanity, let's not meet again, Tom. Edit. I went to the cops when it first started. They knew who he was immediately, but told me there was nothing they could do unless he actually did something, and to basically just stay away from him. As if I wasn't trying. 2. When I was 25, over 10 years ago, I met a guy who grew up with some friends of mine. He seemed really cool, and we started dating. After about a month, I noticed Kurt was very jealous and controlling. If I mentioned I was with a group of friends, if any of the guys were single, he accused me of sleeping with them and would ignore me for a couple of days. In retrospect, I should have gotten out of Dodge, but I was admittedly an insecure girl who was afraid to be alone back then. Another few weeks passed, and I'm a week away from getting my new apartment, which was in the same complex as his. I figure I can tough it out and break up with him when I get the place. Staying at his house was a quick walk to work. Staying at my friend's was a half-hour bike ride on a rough gravel shoulder on the side of a dark highway. Turned out, he broke up with me. No big deal. This is where it gets ugly. He would continuously message me on MSN with passive-aggressive insults. He was the king of jabs that, to an outsider, wouldn't seem so bad. I tried blocking him and changing my email, but he would realize he was blocked and start contacting friends. He even contacted a really obscure friend I had never talked about, leading me to believe he hacked my email. He would show up at my patio doors and walk right in if it wasn't locked. He'd come in and just grab things and say he was borrowing it. He'd bring it back, and things stayed peaceful, I guess. One day he came in and I was in my room folding laundry. He proceeded to flirt and joke. It was actually funny, so I laughed. He took that as an invite, and sparing the details, didn't stop until I was in tears. That was the day I started double-checking the patio doors, and sacrificed a nice breeze on warm days. At the time, because I knew him and was laughing with him, I thought I was to blame, so never told anyone. A couple weeks later, I was at his brother's place in his building. Small town. He called me asking where I was. I asked if he was at my door. I looked outside and sure enough, he was there. I told him I was at his brother's. I'd known his brother for years before I even knew he existed. His brother never even mentioned him. Now I know why. Kurt started accusing me of sleeping with his brother. I went downstairs to calm him, feeling safe since his brother was in the building and knew where I was. He yelled at me and kicked me in the stomach. I went back and told his brother, who was going to go confront him, but I told him no. With that, I went to the police and made a report. I also had the police come facilitate getting possessions back. He refused to return. That was a separate call. I did not get my things that day. Kurt told the cops they were gifts to him. He later returned them on his own time because... control. Things quieted down. I eventually got a new boyfriend in the States. I was living close to the Detroit border. My boyfriend contacted me and said Kurt tried to add him on MySpace. I looked at the existing page and he had changed it so it was all pictures of me with slanderous comments. He did that so my boyfriend would see it. Luckily, the boyfriend knew all about him already. If you're wondering why I didn't go to the police again, here's why. I would text him often telling him off and threaten to go to the police. He would then threaten to charge me with harassment due to the texts. My career relies on a clear criminal check. I was afraid to risk it. Also, when I reported the assault, the small-town officer claimed he could use force to remove me from his apartment, even after I said I never entered but was in the hallway. I didn't trust the police now. He would watch my apartment and ask whose car was in my spot, telling me he felt betrayed. He would message me telling me he made dinner and to come over. To be honest, I was afraid not to. I'd go, eat, and leave. It seemed to make him feel he was in control, and I felt it was better than any potential lashing out if I didn't go. I eventually moved to another town, but the passive-aggressive abuse continued. Kurt had moved to another province where my niece lived, coincidence, and started using my niece to get at me. They conspired to tell me he sexually assaulted her. I stopped speaking to her as well after that. Who does that? I eventually moved across the country, and even then, a year later, he contacted someone I met up with out there that was also from our hometown. Only when this guy told him he knows all about him and if he messes with me, he's messing with him, did it finally all stop. Then 10 years later, last October, I moved back home. I didn't change my location on my Facebook because even years later I didn't want him easily finding out where I was. I also posted that if anyone asks about me, not to share my information. I got a notification on a dating website that Kurt wanted to meet me. I know this was his way of letting me know he's back too and still around. I hadn't thought of seeing him on there. I was afraid to go out at night, and when I did, I was always looking over my shoulder. A week passed with no further contact. A few weeks later, I saw him at a festival. We made eye contact, and I hated that he may have seen my initial expression of shock, so I composed myself and said hello. He simply smirked. I felt like I had looked into the eyes of the devil. I left, watching to make sure he didn't follow me, and to make sure he didn't see what car I got into. I knew that he had seriously abused women since, but had gotten off every time because he hires the best lawyers. My only comfort is that I don't think he revisits the past too much because those women know what he is. His charm won't fool us a second time. I had been contacted about one of the most recent women and was wanting to contribute to the case after speaking to her. So I called the police, asking for a copy of my report. The cop, who said he was allowed to kick me, never even filed it. So if anyone has any other ideas how I can prove this to the mods, I'm all ears. Also, my moves were never about him, just making the point that distance didn't stop him. I hope to never see him again, but I hope the law does. His last girlfriend has a permanent brain injury, and the next one will probably not be so lucky. He gets more confident every time he gets away with it. I'm actually nervous about posting this, in case it gets back to him from someone recognizing the story, but I'm smarter now and take more safety precautions. 3. It's Saturday night. I'm wearing a floral dress and my hair is tousled to perfection. My lips stained a crimson red, bound to make him eat his heart out, across the dinner table. A car approaches my house, and a handsome 22-year-old dude steps out and opens the passenger side door for me. I smile. He smiles. I get in the car and soon we are on our way for some noodles. Cue black-eyed peas, I got a feeling. So we get our food. We make first date talk, yada yada yada. I do this all the time. Except this dude is cooler than most, and the conversation is pretty free-flowing and involved. Seems to me like we're really vibing. After the check is paid and the leftover yakisoba is all loaded up, in the carry-out box, he takes my hand on our way back to the car, and casually asks if I'd like to conclude the night back at his place. I agree, and once again we are on our way. Now, I must express to you just how normal and cool this dude seemed thus far. Pretty great. I was kinda stoked about how well we were getting along, and schoolgirl giddy at the way he held my hand. This, of course, was before I knew about the shooting stars. We arrive at his place and go out on the balcony for a smoke. And suddenly, it's like someone flipped some kind of maniac switch. This guy was pointing all over the sky, screaming about these shooting stars that were in the sky. I'm just like, dude, you're tripping. Though he proceeds to grab my shoulders and spin me around forcefully so that I'm facing the trees, parallel to the balcony, all the while feverishly pointing and screaming, There! There! Do you see it? I'm about 3 jerks away from shaken baby syndrome, so I just go, yeah, I see it, I see the motherfucking shooting star. And he lets me go, and heaves this cartoonish sigh of relief, and says more to himself than to me, Thank God you saw it. Can't believe you almost missed it. So, that was weird as fuck. But I try my best to brush it off as we go back inside, and I mean, things are okay, I guess. I'm almost completely turned off by your weird imaginary astronomy lesson, but I'm doing my best to remain collected. That's a little bit of a feat, though, let me tell you, as this guy's eyes were becoming crazier by the second. I wanted out so bad. But in a stroke of genius, I had agreed to him picking me up for the date, so he is my ride home. Okay, so what, Indigo? Just make an excuse about plans in the morning, and ask politely for him to drive you home. I go over and over it in my head, trying to find the wording that sounds the least like, you seriously creep me out, so I think it's time I go now. At this point, he had disappeared for a bit, and when he returned, I was all ready to flash a smile and make my out. I open my mouth and begin my well-thought-out speech, when I notice the handle of vodka in his hand. Oh. Fuck. Clearly he had not decided to wait for me to begin imbibing spirits, and was already quite inebriated. Plan A was a no-go. I decided to wait out the storm by limiting his alcohol consumption as much as possible, and abstaining entirely myself. The minutes crawled by at the speed of a snail down a frozen road in December. Finally, the rays of dawn began to break through the blinds. Well, as much as sunlight can break through, how tightly he had closed them, to avoid seeing the shadow figures. And I was so ready to go home and hold my rabbit. Seemed like this ordeal was just about over, right? Bro, you ain't even heard the worst of it. As we drive to my house, he says, Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I know I'm not. And I debate even responding, but I decide to ask, Who is everyone? Then, I shit you not, the following comes out of his mouth. I can hear them in the car most of the time. They say the same stuff around here that they said in San Francisco, always talking. Like that one time when I was locked in a car for a week, and I was raped in the ass with a sword. And then the sword was shoved down my throat too. I am flabbergasted. I am frightened. I am feeling very unsafe. I managed to choke out something along the lines of, dude, maybe you should see a doctor about that stuff. Clearly, he has heard this before, as he has a whole spiel prepared, and at the ready to fire his bullets of insanity at me. You see, that's what I mean. I've already been to the hospital 2 times, and had doctors diagnose this and that, and prescribe everything under the sun, but I knew I was just an observer of truth, and that's what people will never understand. And my mom was there and she was crying, and I went over to comfort her and reassure her that I would keep her safe from the things that they say. Then he smiles at me. We have arrived at my house. Oh my God. I'm safe. I'm home. I'll be okay. I just have to open the door and make it out alive. Well, you have a nice day. And then I very calmly exit the car and walk into chez moi. I kinda look around in shock, sort of astounded that I made it out of that situation with all of my skin. I walk over and sit on the couch and just kinda stare straight ahead until my roommate comes downstairs and asks me what's up. The dam of all dams breaks, and I nearly flood my house with tears and break all the windows with my shrill, hysterical scream explanation of the last 12 hours. She consoles me as well as scolds me for not calling me when shit got weird initially. She then made me bacon, and I felt much more centered. Disclaimer: mental illness is not a joke. I am in no way trying to poke fun or make light of a situation where someone is clearly so out of their minds that it's become genuinely disturbing, unsettling, and downright dangerous. By no means is anyone with a mental illness lesser or any of its synonyms. But there are certain chemical imbalances in the brain which require the help of medication to eradicate hallucinations, delusions, etc. The way this guy was talking to me, and the look in his eyes, something was clearly not right. He is clearly in need of help. And I'm kind of at a loss here, as I really feel like he needs to be in the care of some professionals until he can be stabilized. But, 1, I hardly know this guy. I mean, I know where he lives and his phone number. That should be enough. But it's really not my responsibility. I'm not his girlfriend. We've been on 1 date. And you better believe I'm not itching for a second one. 2, to be committed against one's will, it has to be proven that you're either a danger to others or a danger to yourself. Even if I did totally overstep and put my nose where it doesn't belong, and 5150 him, I doubt the responding officer is going to rule him in either of those categories because, like I said at the beginning, for quite a while this dude seemed 100% normal. Cool, even. So Reddit, thanks for reading. I know it was quite a lot and maybe a bit melodramatic. It was really not a fun spot to be in, though. Any advice or suggestions on what course of action, if any, I'm leaning towards forgetting the entire thing happened completely, would be most appropriate and welcomed. And as for you, Shooting Star Guy, I hope you get the help you need. I really do. Just far, far away from me. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 142. Before I go on, can I just say thank you very much to the author of the last story there. I really do appreciate that she included that disclaimer at the end regarding mental illness. While the story itself was quite scary, and we do try to be sympathetic towards people in that situation, but it doesn't stop, the fact that their actions can often scare the bejesus out of you. Obviously, we don't know specifically what that man may have been suffering from. It does sound like a form of schizophrenia to me. I have, of course, as we all have, encountered a number of people with mental illnesses over the years, some of which are diagnosed, others which could do with being diagnosed. But I don't think I've ever encountered anyone with a condition as severe as that. Although the behaviour of that man in that last story, the Shooting Stars man, it does remind me of... there was an actor I was quite fond of. His name was Michael O'Hare. He was the lead in a show called Babylon 5, if anyone happens to be a fan of that. He was the lead of the show for the first year, and then he just disappeared after the first season. And we never quite found out why. There was an explanation put out there, but it didn't really... It seemed like an official creative differences type explanation. And we only learned actually many, many years later when J. Michael Straczynski, the man who makes the show, or made the show, when he finally kind of kept his promise to Michael O'Hare, and actually after Michael had passed away, he'd passed away in 2012, and Straczynski kept his promise in 2013, that he would actually talk about it and be forthright about the reasons. And one of the reasons were because he did have this illness, and he eventually got treatment for it, and, well, he never quite got his career going again. I think his life was generally pretty good, with occasional relapses, but the fact is, there's treatment out there, and it might take time to find the right balance of medication, but if you find yourself struggling with that sort of thing, then please do seek help, because help is available. Well, that may be a bit of a downer, sorry folks, but it's just something I wanted to say. Alright, before I head off, let me think, where are we? Okay, this will be Monday, you'll be watching this. by which point you'll already know if that new graphics card I mentioned the other day has worked or not. Fingers and toes crossed. So, let's see, Tuesday we'll have subscriber stories. Wednesday we'll have 3 True Scary Stories again. And last Thursday I was going to do a glitch video, but I decided to go ahead and do that collab instead because the timing was right for it. So yeah, we'll have Glitch in the Matrix stories this Thursday. I've already got most of what I need, actually. And the usual paranormal on Friday, and possibly TIFU next Saturday. But don't hold me to that one. If I get an idea for something else, something new to try, I might do that. But failing that, TIFU. Okay. And with that, I think I've kept you waiting a bit too long, so I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.